Hi, Kevin Martin here, your UT admissions guy. I'm currently in downtown Dallas. Behind me you can see the Old Red Museum, built in 1892, which was the first courthouse in Dallas County. To the left of me is the Dallas County Records Building, which was built in 1913. Late 1800s until the mid-1950s, things were a lot different in the state of Texas and also in the United States. Inside today, when you walk into the Records Building, there's Drinking Fountain number 1. Drinking Fountain number 1 is an art installment. It's a functioning water fountain where there's an illumination where there used to be a plaque that signified that fountain as a whites-only water fountain. When you press the button, there is a newsreel, so it's a video showing newspaper records from the 1960s of state authorities assaulting African-American protesters during the Civil Rights Movement. And this is a history that is 3 generations away. There are people that have living memories of this time in our country's life, where we had serious problems with segregation, racism, and so on. But some of that prejudice still takes place today, which is why I'm conducting a 4-part installment on the UT versus Fisher case, Fisher versus the University of Texas at Austin case, where Abigail Fisher is challenging the use of race in college admissions. And this is a history that I think a lot of people are just not familiar with. We have a very complex history, especially in the state of Texas, with segregation between African Americans and whites. And this is a history that lives on today. And it's important for us to talk about race, and especially as it relates to race in higher education. I think some people don't realize that the Fisher case is not just the first time that the Supreme Court has looked at affirmative action in the United States. But is in fact a long history of cases going back to the 1950s, some of which took place specifically in the state of Texas. Texas has a very complex history with race, and especially as it pertains to race and access to education. Today I'm going to talk about 4 cases that are especially important for the affirmative action debate in the United States. The first case is in 1950. It was Heman Sweat versus the University of Texas at Austin president T.S. Painter. Sweat versus Painter predates Brown versus the Board of Education by 4 years. Heman Sweat was admitted to the University of Texas School of Law. At the time, in order to go to law school at UT, you only had to show proof of a college diploma, pay a small application fee, submit your application, and you were in. That was it. But this was the time where we had separate but equal, where there were white schools and black universities, white water fountains, black water fountains, and so on. And so Heman Sweat, as an African American, had to attend the black law school, which was not on University of Texas's campus. It was in downtown Austin. And the Supreme Court was looking at is this truly separate but equal, as established in the Plessy versus Ferguson case. And the Supreme Court found that the law school in downtown Austin was not equal. It had a significantly smaller library. There were less professors there. It was in an old rundown building, and it was not to the same standard as the law school that white students would attend. And so the Supreme Court found in favor of Heman Sweat, ruled in favor of, or ruled against separate but equal as established in Plessy versus Ferguson, and it laid the foundation for Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which led to the desegregation of public universities, public schools, not just in the state of Texas, but in the United States. The second case that's relevant took place in 1978. This time it was in the state of California. It was the University of California versus Backe. Backe was a white male. He was applying for entry to the University of California Davis Medical School. At the time in 1978, this was common practice amongst universities in the United States to allot a separate number of spaces for African Americans, for Hispanics, for white people, and so on. And there were African Americans who were given spaces when they were vastly underqualified compared to their whiter Asian peers. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Backe, demonstrating that you can't have a quota system in place. For instance, there is no quota system in place today. Fisher is not challenging whether there's a certain amount of space allotted for African Americans. But at the time, this is what was going on. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Backe. Backe enrolled into the University of California Davis Medical School, where he would go on to complete his medical degree and go on to be a practicing doctor. So the Supreme Court ruled against quotas, and so we no longer have a quota system today, and we haven't had quotas on American college campuses since 1978. The next case is particularly important. It took place in the state of Texas. Again, going back to this idea that Texas has always been a battleground for racism and affirmative action. And it was Hotwood versus Texas. So Hotwood case was adjudicated in 1996. Hotwood, along with 3 other plaintiffs, were white applicants who were denied admission to the University of Texas School of Law, despite having higher LSAT scores and GPAs than almost every other minority admit. So there were a number of minority applicants who were gaining admission to UT Law, despite the fact that they were underqualified amongst their white peers. Hotwood was considered the perfect plaintiff because she was demonstrating that my test scores are higher, my GPA is higher, but I'm being denied spaces, or me and my co-plaintiffs are being denied spaces to the UT School of Law. The Hotwood case was the first successful overturning of any affirmative action policy in the state of Texas as it pertains to law schools. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Hotwood, and she was allowed entry into the University of Texas School of Law. As a result, the Texas legislature produced a law called House Bill 588. House Bill 588 is commonly known as the Top 10% Rule. So this was in 1997 that established a race-neutral means by which to increase diversity at public universities in the state of Texas. The Supreme Court, though they ruled in favor of Hotwood, also demonstrated and agreed with universities when they said that there is a competing interest to increase diversity, not just on our college campuses, but also in our classrooms. House Bill 588 was a neutral way to increase that diversity on college campuses. After the passing of the Top 10% law, there was an increase in minority enrollment, and it was later modified to Senate Bill 175. Senate Bill 175 was passed in 2008 because there were so many people being admitted under the Top 10% law that there weren't many spaces left for those students who were not automatically admitted. Senate Bill 175 changed the law to say that 75% of spaces are reserved for those students who are automatically admitted. That's why that number changes from top 7%, top 8% from year to year. But the Hotwood ruling was the first major challenge to affirmative action that ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Unlike in Backe, where we're addressing quotas, this was actually addressing the use of race in the college admissions process. That brings us to the final case. It was actually 2 cases at the University of Michigan, which was Grutter versus Bollinger and Gratz versus Bollinger. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Grutter, where they found that, and this is currently what we use today, this overruled the Hotwood decision, where the Supreme Court found that universities have a compelling interest in promoting diversity, and so we can use race in admissions. Race as one factor amongst many factors to determine whether an applicant is admitted or not. Race is used as one of many biographical considerations when reviewing the overall context of an applicant. That use of race in admissions is what I will cover in the last film of this, or last installment of this 4-part series. But notably, the case alongside Grutter was Gratz versus Bollinger, which was struck down by the Supreme Court. The Gratz case was asking the question, can there be points assigned based on someone's race? What the University of Michigan was doing in their law school is they were saying if you're an African American, you get more points in our process than if you were Asian or white. Supreme Court said this was unconstitutional and violates the 14th Amendment right to due process. Most notably, what the Supreme Court set out was that the law schools have an interest in receiving or achieving a critical mass of diversity on their college campus. This is sort of a vague criteria, and that's one of the things that's being challenged in the Fisher case today, is what constitutes a critical mass. Currently, the University of Texas admissions policy is aiming towards achieving this critical mass, but the Fisher case is challenging what exactly a critical mass means. How do we know when we've received or there's enrolled enough minority enrollees on college campuses to achieve this critical mass? And also notably, what the Fisher case is also challenging is in 2003, the Supreme Court said, you know, affirmative action, race in America, is a constantly evolving policy, it's a constantly evolving history, and hopefully 25 years in the future, we will no longer need to use, you know, race-based policies in order to achieve diversity. So 25 years was the standard, yet in 2008, Abigail Fisher sued the University of Texas, arguing that there were lesser qualified minority applicants who were taking her space and the spaces of white applicants at the University of Texas for undergraduate admissions. And that's what we're revisiting today. The University of Texas is challenging Fisher, saying that not only is there a compelling interest in increasing diversity on college campuses, but also that the admissions process is one mechanism to increase minority enrollment and also increase minority applicants. In the second installment on this 4-part Fisher series, I'm going to look specifically at what's going on with the Fisher case, the facts of the case, and then in the third installment, I'm going to look at the specific arguments. What's Fisher saying? What's the University of Texas at Austin saying? And what do the Supreme Court justices think about it? And then in the fourth installment, we're going to talk about how race is actually used today in the University of Texas admissions process. Thanks.